Okay, so have you ever like stared at a blank page and you know you have to write something, but you just kind of freeze up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Happens all the time.
Right. Whether it's a research paper or even just like an important email, you want it to, sound
Yeah,
good.
you want to get your point across.
Exactly. So today we are diving into advanced writing. And we're going to use this guide you found, an introduction to advanced writing. We'll break down the key elements, strategies, and even like how different cultures approach writing.
I think that's really important
Yeah, totally.
because so much of the writing we do now is for a global audience.
Exactly. By the end of this, you'll not only know what makes writing stand out, but you should be able to make your own writing more impactful too.
I love that. Impactful. Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so your guide starts with like the foundation. It calls them the 6 key expectations of advanced writing.
Okay.
Clarity, organization, critical analysis, formality, audience awareness, and adherence to conventions.
Yeah, it sounds a little intimidating when you put it like that.
I know, right?
But they're really the building blocks.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, critical analysis, what does that even mean?
Well, it sounds more complicated than it is, honestly.
Okay.
It really just means going beyond just summarizing. You have to evaluate different ideas, look at the evidence, and then, form your own conclusions.
Oh, so it's not just repeating what other people have said.
Exactly. You're adding your own perspective.
Right.
Like, let's say you're writing a research paper.
Yeah.
You're not just summarizing the sources you're reading, you're analyzing them, figuring out what they mean, and then drawing your own conclusions based on the evidence.
Got it. So you're adding something new to the conversation. Okay. What about clarity? I feel like that one is, well, sometimes I read things and I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
What did I just read?
Right. Clarity is so important.
Yeah.
Well, let's say you have to put together some furniture.
Okay. Yeah.
But the instructions are just terrible. They're confusing. They skip steps. You can't even understand the diagrams.
Ugh, the worst.
It's so frustrating, right?
Totally. I just give up.
That's what happens when there's a lack of clarity in writing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you're writing.
So it could be like a scientific report, a marketing campaign, even just an email.
Exactly. If it's not clear, people won't understand it, and they might just give up.
Okay, so no matter how complex the topic is, you have to make it clear for your reader.
Exactly. Make those ideas crystal clear.
Okay, got it. What about organization, though? I mean, does it really matter as long as all the info is there?
Yeah.
Sometimes I just put everything on the page and just hope it makes sense.
Well, think about it like this, okay? Have you ever been to a presentation where the speaker is just all over the place? They're jumping between ideas, like there's no clear structure.
Ugh. Yeah, you're lost after 5 minutes.
Right. And even if the information is good, it's hard to follow because it's so disorganized. It's like building a house without a blueprint.
Okay, I see what you mean.
You need that solid structure to support everything else. So even with brilliant ideas, they can get lost if they're not organized in a way that makes sense to the reader.
Okay, so you can have the best content in the world.
Yeah.
But if it's not organized, no one's going to get it.
Pretty much.
Okay, what about formality? I feel like that one is tricky.
It definitely depends on the context, right?
Right, because like a blog post versus like a research paper.
Exactly, yeah. For example, in academic writing, you're expected to be more formal, more objective, avoid slang or contractions, things like that. But even in less formal settings like a blog post, you still need to think about your audience and your purpose.
Right. So like a playful tone might work for a travel blog, but not so much for a professional email.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. So formality is like choosing the right level of, professionalism.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, cool. What about audience awareness? Isn't that kind of like formality?
It is related, but it's a little bit deeper than that. It's about really understanding who you're writing for and what they need from your writing.
Right.
So let's say you're explaining a new product.
Okay.
Your approach is going to be totally different if you're talking to a tech expert versus like someone who's never used anything like that before.
Right. You're going to have to explain a lot more to the person who's not familiar with the technology.
Exactly.
Versus the expert, you can use a lot more jargon.
Exactly. And that's what audience awareness is all about.
So it's like you're speaking their language, basically.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
Okay. And the last one is adherence to conventions. That sounds a lot like follow the rules, but are there benefits to following the rules?
There are. Definitely. Think about citations in a research paper.
Okay.
They're not just there to avoid plagiarism. They help your reader understand where your information is coming from, and they allow them to check it themselves if they want to.
Oh, okay.
So it's about transparency and building trust with your audience. And conventions can vary depending on the type of writing you're doing, like academic, professional, creative. But following those conventions ensures that your writing is clear, it's credible, and it's consistent.
Okay, I think I'm getting this. So we've covered the 6 pillars of advanced writing. And like we said, they might seem basic,
Yeah.
but they really are the foundation for, writing that has an impact on your reader. Okay, so your guide also dives into this thing called the rhetorical situation.
Right.
And honestly, that sounds a little intimidating.
It might sound fancy, but it's actually pretty simple.
Okay, good.
It's just about understanding the context of your writing. Who are you writing to? What's your purpose? What are the circumstances surrounding this piece of writing?
Okay.
Answering those questions is the rhetorical situation.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. How does that actually work, though, in real life?
So let's say we have a scientific report on climate change,
Okay.
and then we also have a blog post that's arguing for a specific climate policy.
Okay, I can see where you're going with this.
Right. They both deal with the topic of climate change, but they have very different purposes, audiences, and contexts.
Yeah, totally.
The scientific report is probably aimed at other scientists, experts in the field,
Right.
and its purpose is to present research findings.
Very objective, a lot of data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's going to follow all the conventions of scientific writing.
Versus the blog post, which is trying to convince people to support a specific policy.
Exactly. It's going to be written in a more persuasive style.
Right.
It might use more emotional language, personal stories, that kind of thing, because it's trying to connect with a wider audience and motivate them to take action.
Okay, that's a really good example. So, understanding the rhetorical situation can really impact how you write something.
Absolutely.
It influences the tone, the style, how much detail you include, and your whole approach, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how all of this fits together.
Yeah.
So we've got the building blocks, the 6 pillars of advanced writing, and then we've got this idea of the rhetorical situation, which helps us understand the context of what we're writing.
Yeah, that's a great summary. So welcome back to our deep dive into advanced writing. We've been, laying the groundwork, talking about the key elements and the context of writing.
Right, the foundation.
Exactly.
But now I'm kind of ready to see how it all works in practice.
Okay, yeah, let's get more practical.
Awesome.
You mentioned earlier how formality can change depending on what you're writing.
Right.
That's actually a really good example of something we're going to explore now, which is contrastive rhetoric.
Okay. Contrastive rhetoric.
Yeah. It's basically the idea that cultural norms can influence how people write.
Okay, so it's not just about knowing, the grammar rules?
No, not at all.
There's, a whole cultural layer to it.
Exactly. What might be considered a strong argument in one culture could be seen as weak or even offensive in another.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so for instance, some cultures really value directness in communication, getting straight to the point.
Right, say what you mean.
Right. But other cultures prefer a more indirect approach, kind of easing into the main point.
Oh, so you have to kind of read between the lines.
Yeah, in a way. And those differences can lead to misunderstandings, especially in professional settings.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that.
Imagine a business negotiation where one person is used to very direct communication.
Right.
And the other person is relying on subtle cues and indirect language.
Yeah, that could get messy.
It could definitely lead to frustration on both sides.
So how do you navigate those differences? Is there a right way to write across cultures?
There's no single right way, but I think the most important thing is awareness. Just being aware of those cultural differences can help you avoid a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I know I'm writing to someone from a culture that values indirectness, I might phrase my requests or suggestions more subtly.
Exactly, yeah. It's about being sensitive to those cultural nuances. And these differences can show up in lots of areas of writing.
Really? Like what?
Well, the way you structure arguments, how you present evidence, even how you express emotions can vary from culture to culture.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? For instance, academic writing in some cultures really emphasizes objectivity.
Okay.
Keeping a clear separation between the writer and the subject matter.
So it's all about the facts, no personal opinions.
Exactly.
Interesting.
But in other cultures, academic writing is more personal, more subjective.
Really?
Yeah, the writer's voice and perspective are woven into the argument.
Huh. So a research paper from one culture could look completely different from a research paper from another culture.
Exactly. Even if they're about the same topic.
That's crazy.
And these differences go way beyond just academia.
Mm-hmm.
Think about marketing materials.
Okay.
A campaign that's really successful in one country might totally flop in another.
Right.
If it doesn't consider the cultural values and preferences of that target audience.
It's like you said, you have to know your audience.
Exactly. So this idea of contrastive rhetoric, I think super relevant these days.
Yeah, totally.
We live in such a globalized world. We're constantly interacting with people from different cultures.
It's more important than ever to be aware of these differences.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but how do we actually put this knowledge into practice?
That's a great question.
Like, how can we use this idea of the contrastive rhetoric to improve our own writing?
Well, one strategy is to do something called a cross-cultural rhetorical analysis.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. It basically means looking at texts from different cultures and paying attention not just to what they say, but how they say it.
Okay.
We're looking for the underlying values, beliefs, and communication styles that are reflected in the writing.
So it's almost like putting on a cultural lens when you read.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so I can see how that would be helpful. But can you give me a more specific example?
Sure. Let's say you're reading a business proposal from a company in, say, China.
Okay.
A cross-cultural analysis would involve understanding how Chinese business practices and communication styles are reflected in that proposal.
Okay.
So you might notice a greater emphasis on building relationships,
Oh.
showing respect for hierarchy, maybe using more indirect language to convey sensitive points.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because those are all values that are important in Chinese culture.
Right.
And understanding those values can help you interpret the proposal more effectively.
Wow, this is making me realize how much I've taken for granted about my own writing style.
Yeah, we all do.
It's like, I'm so used to writing in a certain way that I don't even realize it's influenced by my own culture.
Exactly.
So learning about contrastive rhetoric is not just about understanding other cultures, it's also about becoming more aware of your own cultural biases.
That's a really good point. And that awareness can help you become a more flexible and adaptable communicator.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the context of writing, but your guide also goes into the specifics of different types of writing, or genres.
Right. Different genres have different rules.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on this a bit already.
Yeah.
But why is understanding genres so important for, someone who wants to be a better writer?
Well, think of genres like different tools for different jobs.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb, right?
Definitely not. You need the right tool for the right job.
Exactly.
So what are the tools, so to speak, for different writing genres?
Well, each genre has its own set of conventions and expectations.
Okay.
And understanding those conventions makes your writing more effective
Okay.
because you're meeting the needs of your audience.
So it's kind of like knowing the rules of the game.
Exactly.
If you're writing a research paper, you need to know the rules of scientific writing.
Yeah.
But if you're writing a marketing email, those rules go out the window and a whole new set comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A research paper is about contributing to a scholarly conversation,
Right.
building on existing knowledge,
Yeah.
presenting your findings in a very rigorous way.
Right.
So it has a very specific structure.
Okay.
You've got the abstract, the introduction, the literature review, methods, results, discussion.
Right.
It's all designed to achieve that very specific purpose.
Yeah.
Whereas a marketing email, that might be all about persuasion,
Right. Yeah.
using emotional appeals,
Right.
having a clear call to action.
Okay.
And then you have legal documents,
Right.
which are all about precision and clarity above everything else.
Oh, yeah. I hate reading those.
Right. And creative writing genres, like poetry or fiction, those have their own sets of conventions too.
Yeah. Like they break the grammar rules sometimes
Exactly.
to make it sound better.
Yeah, to achieve specific effects.
Okay. So understanding genres is about more than just following the rules. It's about using the right tool for the job and communicating effectively within that specific context.
You got it.
But how do we actually get better at understanding all these different genres?
Well, reading is a good start, but your guide suggests a more active approach called genre analysis.
Genre analysis.
Yeah. It's similar to the rhetorical analysis we talked about earlier, but this time we're focusing specifically on the conventions of a particular genre.
Okay.
What makes a research paper,
Mhm.
what makes a blog post, and so on.
So you're kind of dissecting a piece of writing to figure out how it works.
Exactly. Like, let's say you want to write opinion pieces for newspapers.
Okay, yeah.
You could pick a few opinion pieces from different publications and really analyze them.
Okay.
What kind of arguments are they making? How are they structuring those arguments? What kind of evidence are they using? What's the tone? What kind of language are they using?
Wow, that's a really interesting approach. It's like you're reverse engineering the genre.
Exactly. And by understanding the common elements,
Right.
you can start to apply those insights to your own writing.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you'll have a better sense of what works, what doesn't, and how to tailor your writing to the expectations of that specific genre.
This is making me realize how much thought actually goes into writing.
Yeah.
It's not just about having good ideas, it's about understanding the context, the audience, the genre, and then using all those tools to get your message across.
You've got it. Advanced writing is all about making those choices, those deliberate choices.
Welcome back. We've been covering a lot of ground in this deep dive into advanced writing.
We have, yeah.
Huh.
From the foundations to cultural influences to the specifics of different genres.
Right. But now I think it's time to put all of this knowledge into practice, right?
Absolutely. Let's talk strategy.
Okay, I'm ready for the practical tips.
All right, well, let's go back to one of those most important pillars.
Okay.
Clarity.
Clarity, yeah.
I mean, it really is the foundation of good communication, right?
Right, because even if you have amazing ideas, if they're not clear, they're going to get lost.
Exactly. So how do we make our writing clear?
Yeah.
Well, one of the most important things is using precise language.
Okay.
Really think about your word choices. Are you using the most accurate words?
Yeah.
Is there a simpler way to say what you're trying to say?
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I catch myself using big words when a smaller word would do just fine.
We all do it, yeah. And be careful with jargon. If you're writing for a general audience, you probably want to avoid it altogether.
Right. Or at least explain it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because I've definitely read things where I'm like, I have no idea what this means.
Totally.
And another tip for clarity, use strong verbs.
Okay.
And try to write in the active voice as much as possible.
Okay, active voice.
Because the active voice makes your writing more direct and engaging, whereas the passive voice can make it sound kind of weak and impersonal.
Okay, so like instead of saying the report was written by the team,
Yeah.
you would say the team wrote the report.
Exactly. It's a subtle difference, but it makes a big impact.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And don't be afraid to use examples,
Yeah.
concrete examples,
Oh, yeah, examples are so helpful.
because they can bring those abstract ideas to life.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you're trying to explain something complex and
Yeah.
then you use an example.
Right.
And it's like suddenly it all makes sense.
Exactly. And that happens in writing too.
Totally.
By grounding your ideas in real-world examples, you're making them more relatable and memorable for your reader.
Okay, so clarity, we've got precise language, strong verbs, active voice, and examples.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Okay, so what about organization? How do we make our writing flow?
Okay, so for organization, start with a strong introduction.
Okay, yeah.
Make sure your main point, your thesis, is stated clearly right up front.
Right, no burying the lead.
Exactly. And then break down your ideas into manageable chunks. Use paragraphs to separate each point you're making.
Okay, paragraphs, yeah.
And transitions are so important. Transitions connect those ideas together and create a nice, smooth flow for your reader.
Right, transitions.
Yeah, but honestly, they're one of the things I struggle with the most.
Me too. What are some good tips for transitions?
Well, think of transitions like signposts.
Okay.
They're guiding the reader through your writing. There are all kinds of transitions, but some common ones are words like however, therefore, in addition.
Oh, okay.
Use those words strategically to signal to your reader when you're shifting gears.
Right, so you're not just like randomly throwing them in there.
Exactly. They need to be purposeful. And sometimes you might need a whole phrase or even a whole sentence to transition between larger sections.
Oh, okay.
But the key is to make sure those transitions are clear and logical.
Yeah, because I've read things where I'm like, how did we even get here?
Right, exactly. Good transitions prevent that kind of confusion.
Okay, so we've got our structure,
Yeah.
we've got our transitions.
Yeah.
Now we need to support our claims.
Evidence, right?
Evidence.
That's where critical thinking and research skills really come into play.
Right, and we've talked about how important evidence is, but it can be hard to find and use effectively.
It can be.
So, any tips for making that process easier?
Well, the first step is finding credible sources.
Okay, right.
Depending on what you're writing, this could be academic journals, websites, data, even interviews.
Right, but there's so much information out there.
There is, yeah.
How do you know which sources to trust?
That's a really good question. You have to be critical.
Right?
Ask yourself, is this source known for accuracy? Is it objective? Is the information up to date?
Oh, okay.
Does the author have expertise in this area?
Right.
Are there any biases to be aware of?
Yeah, you really have to look beyond the surface.
You do.
Yes, sir.
And once you've found those credible sources, you have to integrate that evidence smoothly into your writing.
Okay, yeah.
Use clear language to summarize the information.
Right.
Cite your sources properly, of course.
Of course.
And then, the most important thing, explain how that evidence supports your overall argument.
So it's not just about, like, throwing in a bunch of quotes and stats.
No, not at all. It's about weaving that evidence into your narrative in a way that makes sense to the reader.
Right, so it all fits together.
Exactly. Think of it like you building a case. You're presenting your evidence to persuade your audience.
Okay, that makes sense.
And one last thing. Remember to revise and edit your work.
Oh, yeah, editing.
It's such a crucial part of the writing process.
Because I know that, like, sometimes I look back at my first drafts and I'm like, what was I thinking?
We all do it, yeah. It's so important to take that time to polish your writing and make sure your ideas are coming across as clearly and effectively as possible.
Totally. But are there any tips for making that revision process more productive?
Sure. One helpful thing is to set your writing aside for a day or two.
Okay.
And then come back to it with fresh eyes.
Oh, yeah, fresh eyes. Totally.
Because it'll help you see it from a new perspective.
Right, and you can see things you missed before.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get feedback. Share your work with others. Whether it's a friend, a colleague, or an editor, feedback can be so valuable.
Oh, definitely.
It can help you see your writing in new ways and identify areas you can improve.
Yeah, it's so true. Even though it's hard sometimes to hear criticism.
It can be tough, yeah.
But ultimately, it makes your writing so much stronger.
Exactly. And remember, writing is a process.
Well, yes, yeah.
It's a journey. It's not about perfection.
Totally.
It's about learning and growing. The more you write, the better you'll get.
Wow, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I feel like I have a whole new toolbox of strategies that I can use to improve my writing.
I'm glad to hear that.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some inspiration and some practical advice to level up your writing game. So keep practicing, explore different genres, and most importantly, have fun with it. Thanks for joining us.